What if you could upcycle this plain glass bottle into a whimsical miniature building? I'll show you the textures and details that bring it to life. Hey there, Sandy here. Welcome to another polymer clay video at keepsakecrafts.net. It is so very satisfying to take an object that would be thrown out and upcycle it into something fun and fanciful. Today we're going to take bottles and turn them into houses with cool, fun architectural details that call to you. Your first step is to look at photos of buildings and architectural details and save a bunch that you like. Now go through your stash of texture sheets, molds, and texture tools and consider how you can simplify and render some of those details that most call to you. As you look at your supply of textures, consider how you might cut out portions of your textures or reshape them to create different kinds of details. For example, I have this texture plate and I cut out these little pieces for details. Mix 4 to 5 ounces of clay of the color that you want for your house. Using just a single color keeps the focus on the textures. These are just a few of the textures that I pulled out of my stash, but you don't have to use just ready-made textures. You can also use things like this is a soap saver. It was just a couple dollars and it makes a great background, like wall texture. And this is a piece of a plastic placemat, and I love just the subtle overall pattern it gives. Roll your clay to a medium thick setting. I used a number 3 on my atlas, which is just under 2 millimeters thick. Use your sheets of clay and your texturing tools to create a palette of textures and shapes to choose from as you work on your project. Now here are some of my best tips for making good impressions. First of all, use a release such as Armor All, especially with metal or acrylic textures. Put the release on the sheet of clay rather than on the texturing tool. And you only need a tiny bit, that little tiny drop. I can spread it all over the entire surface. You just need the thinnest of layers over the whole surface. Now for clear and silicone stamps, you're going to put your stamp texture side up and then the clay over it, release side down, and a sheet of paper over that. And rub with a burnishing tool. I love this tool. It is a cabinet knob. I found this at the Home Depot. And it's perfect because it's gently rounded, but you can press nice and firmly. You're going to do that starting in the center and work your way out. And by doing this, you'll get a nice deep impression. Even with some texture sheets like this set, has a kind of a shallow texture. So I found this is the best way to get a good texture. And you can also see through the paper where you've rubbed and where you haven't. And there you go, a beautiful, oh, see, I missed that edge, but that's okay. Almost perfect texture. These plastic texture plates like you get from Create Along have a great variety of textures, but they can be tricky to get a good texture from. So we're going to do it similarly. Don't skip the release on these because you will be picking clay out of your texture. So your texture plate, texture side up, your clay, release side down, and a piece of paper. But for these, pick them up and start pressing with your fingers. You can rub firmly and you can see kind of from both sides where you've pressed. Once you get it embedded in there, if you want, you can go in with your burnishing tool. And notice that you remember how I missed those edges in the previous one. So I'll make sure and really get all of the edges in this one. I'd like to take a moment to thank this video's sponsor, Skillshare, an online learning platform with creative classes on topics such as polymer clay sculpting, drawing, painting, watercolor, digital art, and photography, just to name a few that I'm personally interested in. I've been a Skillshare member for about 3 years now, and 2 classes that had an incredible impact on my creative process are Brent Eviston's How to Draw a Beginner's Guide and his The Art of Science and Drawing. I've always wished I could draw better, and the clear, step-by-step lessons finally helped it click. What's really exciting is how those observational skills from drawing have improved my sculpting too. It's creative cross-training at its best. I've also loved exploring digital art classes and even classes on productivity and running a small creative business. Skillshare makes it easy to keep learning new things that feed your creativity. If you're ready to explore new skills, the first 500 people to use my link in the description or scan the QR code will receive a 1-month free trial of Skillshare Premium. That's your chance to start learning today and see where your creativity takes you. Now let's get back to the project. If you're going to use these right away, you can just leave it on the paper. But if you're saving it for later, then you do want to remove it from the paper because it will start to leach your clay. So look at that, a beautiful texture. If you have plastic texture sheets such as these, you do it a little bit differently. Now often these have the pattern on both sides, so you can choose which side you want to make your impression on, whether you want it to be an innie or an outie. You do it similarly. We've got the texture with the texture side up, clay with the release side down, and a piece of paper. Then I'm going to rub with an acrylic roller. You could use the burnishing knob if you want, but I found when these are a little bigger that the roller is good. So we're not rolling, I'm actually rubbing. It's very similar to what I do with the knob, but this covers a little bit more area. So you can experiment with between these different techniques, which tool you use to rub, your fingers, an acrylic roller, a knob, and see what kind of results you get for your different kinds of textures. And there we go, another super crisp, clear texture. For silicone molds, and by the way, this is an old, I think it's an Amico mold, so I probably won't be able to find a link for this, but you can find similar ones. But for any of your silicone molds, you don't really need a release. But if you find it sticking, then of course you can add one. But you want to start with a ball of clay that's been rolled nice and smooth, because any creases in the clay will remain in your texture. And you want clay that will not quite fill the space that you want. So this might be, and you don't have to mold a whole thing either, you can do just a portion. I just wanted that center sunflower. So let's just do this little sunflower right here. Okay, that's nice and smooth. And I'm testing it. And it's actually a little too much clay because it's overfilling that mold. So I'm going to pull that out and pull off a pinch. Roll it into a ball again. The reason that you underfill it is so that you don't have to worry about cleaning up those messy edges you get when it's overfilled. If you have all of your clay below the surface of the mold, then you'll be certain to have a tidy edge. I could have even a little less there, but I think this will work. So I'm pressing it in firmly, and I'm pressing with my fingers from the front and the back so that I get all of the detail that's in the mold. And then this edge, I'm just going to use my fingers and gently roll it away from the edge. Again, that cleans it up for you, so you don't have to do any cleaning up once you pop it out of the mold. And there. Of course, if you were doing a border like this, you would do the same thing, only you would roll it into a log that doesn't quite fill that. For molds that aren't silicone, like these metal ones from Lisa Pavelka, you definitely have to have a release. So what I do is I squirt a little in there, and more than I need, and I use a finger to rub, and then just use a paper towel and kind of dab out the excess. Even if you were to wipe this thoroughly, there would still be a thin coating of the Armor All on there, and that's what will give you the releasing power. So just like before, roll a smooth log, which usually starts with a smooth ball. Now for intricate border molds, or ones with a lot of detail, like this bamboo actually is pretty detailed, you might want to leave your log a bit long, and that way you'll have a handle for gently pulling it out of the mold. So this is just about right because it's filling it just barely. I can put my finger in there and feel, I don't know if you can, you probably can't see it, but there's a little dip on the back side, so it's not perfectly level. So you just work your way on the back. Now if you made your log a little small and you needed to fill it more, which I don't really, well let's say I do, like right in this point where there's the joint in the bamboo, you can just fill it from the back. And that way you won't have any creases showing on the front. So if I just push that there, now I've filled that. If I made that area a little thin, I can just put a piece in from the back. And I'm also kind of pushing it down along the length. So this actually takes quite a while to make that palette of textures I showed you on the tile. Took probably an hour and a half, a couple hours. If you think you may have overfilled it, especially these metal ones are nice because you can just glide a blade and it will remove that excess. And then you gently grab your handle, gently pull it out. And hopefully, if you've done a good job, you really don't have much of anything along those edges to clean up. For your first bottle, I would suggest you start with a fairly small one. This is a spice bottle. This was like a little condiment bottle with, I think it had maple syrup, something small-ish. It could even go smaller than this, just to kind of get a feel for it. It takes a little while longer than you might think to cover this with all of these different textures. At least for me, but I tend to get into doing all the details. Start with 3 or 4 textures to cover the whole thing. I'm going to leave a little space up here for a roof. If you want it to come down to the table, set it on the table, and then you can set the edge of your clay on the table. And that way it'll come all the way down evenly. Or you can just guess and trim off the excess later. Whatever. And what's interesting is you don't have to have realistic building textures. You can, like this is obviously a stone look. This is the texture you get from this soap saver, which I think makes me think of some kind of a stucco. And we're just going to piece it in, and it looks like I've got this covered. Yeah, that's great. You can use a different one on each side. You can use the same one all around. I think it looks interesting just having a variety. So we'll just... I don't think I even bothered to trim the edges even on this one. I just kind of pieced in other bits. So I've got a wood texture. This is that placemat. This is a smaller stone texture. Once you have the main part of your building, you can use details to cover the seams. And these can be inspired by those architectural details that you gathered. On this one I used strips from those texture plates, that same sunflower. And what I really recommend you do here as you add these pieces is use liquid clay. You saw how easily that came off because I didn't want to press too hard and ruin my texture. So even though we're doing raw clay to raw clay, a little liquid clay will be helpful. And as it sits, the longer it sits, the better it will stick. So you could put pieces on before you add the liquid clay just to audition and make sure you're happy with them. And then once you're sure that's what you want, add your liquid clay, and that will be sure that nothing's going to pop off after you bake it. Now you can use cutters or a craft knife to cut out doors and windows. I really love this arched shape of a doorway, so I'm going to use this football cutter to get my basic shape, but then I'll just use a blade to continue it down straight. So whatever shape makes you happy. You can use square cutters to cut out windows. It's funny, some time ago, before I bought this set of square Kemper cutters, I said, well, you know, I mean, I know how to use a blade to cut out squares. I don't need square cutters. But then I realized that for situations like this where you want to cut it out of the center of something, that's pretty handy. So you can make windows. And I'm just popping these out so I can see for the placement of the next one. And you can lay it out if you want it perfect. So you can carry on like that. And we're not going for a realistic look here, obviously, but just a fun fantasy interpretation of your favorite textures and designs on a building. And get creative in the way you use your textures. For example, I am going to take this bamboo design and I'm going to cut it into rectangular strips. And look, my shutters. I like that. So I'll add some liquid clay and attach those. Maybe some of these other texture plate details would work well, like as a window box. Just have to cut it to the right length. Or shall I cut my shutters? So have fun and just get experimental. The corner detail on this building was my inspiration for using these border strips on my bottle. This amazing doorway gave me the idea to add even more layers and something interesting with depth to my doorway. I love this floral detail under an arch, which is what gave me the idea to use these floral molded pieces on my bottle. So as you look at these details that I chose to add, and then you look at the photos of the architectural details that drew me, you can see where the inspiration came from. And of course yours will be completely different because different things will inspire you. If you want your roofline overhang to stick out, you can add a log of clay about 1/4 of an inch above the lower roof edge. So we'll just tuck that in there. Now here's another example of finding creative uses for your textures. This is a dragon scale texture, but of course I think it's an absolutely perfect roof shingle. And you can do the edge a couple ways. You can just cut it straight across. On this one, I used some of the different sizes of the Create Along Sculpt border cutter. I don't know that I love the look. It's okay. The big one is a little awkward. The smaller one is better, but honestly the one I liked the most was naturally the most time consuming, which was just to come in with a craft knife and trim these out like this and then make it smooth. But for the sake of time, I'm just going to use this scalloped border cutter, which does a pretty good job, I have to admit. Then you can lay your roof on and see by having that little log, it sticks out a bit. I might want to move that up a little. I could make it fatter, just depends on what you want. Just bring your roof down far enough. I might need to add some more details up here because the roof is looking a little low. And here's a great trick. Something we don't often think of in using with polymer clay is scissors. To cut this to the right angle, it's really awkward to get in there with a blade. Scissors, you can just line it up and snip, and then add another piece. And it doesn't have to be the same. I mean, I could make this one wood textured. Why not? We're not going for realism here. Give that the same edge because why not? And I would probably take the time to neaten that up. You can see the difference adding that little log of clay makes. Just makes it look a little bit more like roof. And then you can use your scissors to trim that. And use some of your molded elements, whatever seems like it will work for you, or hand sculpt something to cover the seams. On this one, I use the pieces of bamboo to cover the seams. But this is a pretty cool border mold. Yeah, maybe I use that. Again, reference your architectural details because I love these little medallion type things that were in some of the photos I had gathered. And so I cut up this texture to get a bunch of those. I may have overused them. I don't think they were necessary down here, but I do like them there. Once you're done, if you want to bring out all that detail, you can antique it. I will link to the video I've done on a super quick method for antiquing. Now you know how to make a whimsical bottle house, but the next thing you want to explore is how to add realistic textures to your clay. I've got a video on screen that shows you exactly how to do that. See you in the next video.